Quick Slants is presented by your local New England Honda dealers.
You know what? I woke up this morning dedicated to talking football on this program. I wasn't going to take the temperature of relationships. I wasn't going to read between the lines. Wasn't trying to make sense of why a quarterback taken with the 15th pick in the draft 2 years ago, who nearly won Offensive Rookie of the Year and helped his team get to the playoffs, suddenly has a for sale sign around his neck. But here we are. Don't blame me for the conversation. Blame the guy who's reportedly been shopping Mac Jones this offseason. That would be Bill Belichick. Mike Florio from Pro Football Talk had the report this morning. He joined Tom Curran's Patriots Talk podcast just a little while ago to discuss all the angles of it. Mike.
First question was, what are you doing? And the second question was, who told you this?
Yeah, I know. Yeah. Way to get to the bottom of the story. Who's your source? Please tell me your source. Please out your source to me.
What's interesting, Mike, is this started percolating a little bit, even against my instincts, when Chris Sims said that Bill was pissed about Mac having gone outside the facility and talked to people at Alabama, apparently, about, are we doing this the right way? And at the time, I was like, well, I mean, I guess he probably might have done something like that, but how pissed can Bill be? Now I've since heard the same thing, that he's still pissed, and this seems like an offer to trade or at least explore those possibilities could not be necessarily rooted in the performance, but the disloyalty.
Well, it all goes back to last year. You've got a guy who had a solid rookie season with Josh McDaniels as his offensive coordinator. McDaniels finally leaves to become a head coach again. So what are we going to do about the offense? And I remember as it was happening, I said repeatedly, if it was any other coach in the NFL that was trying to pull off this maneuver to take a career defensive coach, make him the offensive line coach and de facto offensive coordinator, take a failed Giants coach in Joe Judge, who returned under the guise everyone believed, I'm told, of joining the special teams coordinator function, not jumping into the offense and being the quarterback's coach. Judge doesn't get discussed enough in the overall dysfunction that happened last year. But this Frankenstein monster of Patricia and Judge, guys who weren't suited to be offensive coaches, become the guy that Mac Jones has to work with a year after working with Josh McDaniels. See, for Bailey Zappi, he didn't know any different. For McDaniels being there, for Jones, he did know the difference. He saw the contrast, and that's where this thing has its roots. And yeah, it all comes back to how blindly Jones is going to follow the orders, how diligently he just goes along with the way things are as determined from on high by Bill Belichick. And that turned the relationship upside down. And we're still dealing with, I think, the consequences of that wrench being thrown into the relationship between Belichick and Jones.
Mike, do you think this is something that Bill Belichick would want out in the public sphere? The fact that he is shopping his, as of right now, starting quarterback. The most interesting thing for me as a Patriots follower, somebody who covers the team, that came out of the owners' meetings, were the two very different ways in which both Bill Belichick and Robert Kraft spoke about Mac Jones. Is there any way that Bill Belichick would want this out there as if to say, it's not my guy, that's the owner's guy?
Well, I think the easy answer is if Belichick wanted it out there, it would have been out there a while ago. It would have been out there as we were in the early stages of the offseason where we didn't know which quarterbacks were going to land where. The Raiders signed Jimmy Garoppolo. That would seemingly close the door on Mac Jones. The Raiders, one of the obvious potential destinations if a trade is to happen. Now, I think the Raiders are still in play if they don't draft a quarterback in round one because Jimmy Garoppolo's contract is relatively low as starting quarterbacks go. You could have Garoppolo and Jones on your roster, and it wouldn't take up a huge piece of your salary cap overall space, especially since Jones is on his rookie deal. But I think this is something that Belichick will be, I don't want to say ambivalent about. He'll probably be pissed that it got out because somebody talked who shouldn't have talked. That's going to be his perception in all of this. But when you look at what he said last week about the potential for competition between Jones and Bailey Zappi, and you go all the way back to what he said on the way out the door as the season ended. Is Mac Jones your starter next year? And he said Mac Jones has proven he can play in this league. Could you imagine that response? And I run everything he says about Mac Jones through the filter of what would he say if asked that question about Tom Brady? And what he says about Mac Jones is diametrically opposed to what he would say if he was asked those questions when he had an entrenched starter where he would just roll his eyes and harumph if anyone asked a question that would in any way undermine the reality that he has a starting quarterback and there is no competition, there is no conversation to be had. He's the guy.
I look at this and say, boy, Bill, could you sell any lower on the player? Because if you look at it in July, Bill was celebrating the fact that Mac Jones had made a dramatic, quote, dramatic improvement in the offseason from a season in which he was the leading offensive rookie of the year candidate until he got passed at the end of the year. So this to me is you're walking around and saying, yeah, I can't take it with this guy anymore. This guy who his respected colleague, Kyle Shanahan, really wanted to take number 2. So you're 2 years into the Mac Jones experience, a player who you lauded, a player who another respected coach wanted to take a 2 overall before moving away from the table, and now you're going to give him away.
All of this presupposes that Robert Kraft would okay a trade of Mac Jones. I mean, this gets Shakespearean very quickly, and it has shades of the whole Tom Brady, Jimmy Garoppolo, Bill Belichick, Robert Kraft stuff that Seth Wickersham reported about so thoroughly several years ago. There may be some real palace intrigue going on here where Robert Kraft says, yeah, Bill Belichick can run the team however he sees fit, but if push comes to shove, is Robert Kraft going to sign off on a trade of Mac Jones?
All right, Phil Perry's alongside. We got more Mike Florio coming up in the second part of the show. But Phil, when you hear this, the immediate question that we're hearing from folks is, well, how concrete is this? Is he shopping still continuously? Was he shopped? Is shopping the right word?
Yeah, I've gotten some pushback in conversations that I've had today, Tom, on that word, shopping or shopped, as it's used in Mike's story today. But 2 things really have been emphasized to me. Number 1, Bill Belichick keeps things very close to the vest. And so if there's anyone in the building who knows Bill Belichick's plans with Mac Jones, it's probably Bill Belichick and Bill Belichick alone at this point in time. The other thing is that, like every player, although this would obviously be more heavily scrutinized and would be more important for us, Mac Jones was evaluated this offseason by the team. Is he the right guy for the job? How do we get him back to that rookie form that he showed in 2021? I think what happened in 2022, all of the circumstances involved, made that evaluation really difficult, which may have led to some questions for Bill Belichick, which again may have, as Mike reported today, led to some phone calls.
If you're going to really interrogate the situation with Mac and look at this situation for what it is, had Mac had a good 2022, the evaluation wouldn't have been difficult. He didn't have a good 2022, whether it be on the field, perhaps in the locker room, in the meeting rooms, and certainly on the field. So all those things being the case, the question then becomes, is this Mac's fault, or did we set him up to fail? And I think that's what the Patriots have to answer. But again, I don't think he has the 2022 that we witnessed had it not been for the situation that the team put him in. So we wouldn't be standing here on April 4th if it weren't for that idea.
That's why the evaluation is so difficult, because what are the forces at play within the individual? Mac Jones as a player in a vacuum, who can he be? What is he moving forward? What do we have to do to maximize what he brings to the field week in and week out? And how did the environment impact him, Tom? That's what makes it such a difficult eval. Although I will say, again, after the conversations I had today, I believe Mac Jones will be the Patriots quarterback in 2023.
I do too. I just think that it's going to be a shame if 2022 bleeds into 2023. You don't want to lose a game 2 weeks in a row, thanks to the previous result. All right, we got some more Mac, we got some Jack Jones, and we got some tight end talk, along with more Florio coming up after the break. Don't move a muscle. Growth potential. Brought to you by Dr. Matthew Lepresti. Look younger, feel younger, get your hair back with Leonard Hair Transplant Associates. How did Mac Jones do in that Rookie of the Year voting aforementioned? Well, Jamar Chase ran away with it, 84%. Mac, he was in charge for a while. He wound up with 5% of the votes, and there's your other guys, an offensive lineman, and then really another offensive lineman. Send back now to Mike Florio for more on Mac Jones being shop.
Is it over? Is the Mac Jones era already over here? If it's already gotten to this point where Bill Belichick or somebody else from the organization is calling around, seeing if anybody's interested in trading for the guy, is his time in New England done? What do you think, Mike?
I think it's tenuous. I think it's tenuous and to be determined. And I really do think at this point, the key is the draft coming up in 3 weeks and change who gets quarterbacks, who doesn't. Because I've said this about Lamar Jackson recently. I think everything with him is on hold until we get through the draft. Teams looking at quarterbacks, the Colts, for example, at number 4. If they don't have someone there at number 4 that they want and they don't take a quarterback coming out of round 1, do they try to get in the Lamar Jackson sweepstakes? Are there teams lurking outside of the top 10 that would like to try to explore a trade into the upper reaches of the draft to get a quarterback? If they don't have that opportunity, do they become interested in Lamar Jackson? And I think we now throw Mac Jones into that mix. If the Raiders truly are looking at a quarterback and they don't get one, do they look at Mac Jones? Do other teams consider Mac Jones? It depends upon what those teams think about Mac Jones, whether or not he could be a guy who's more like he was in 2021 than what he was in 2022. Those are all things to be determined. But I think that for now, he's a Patriot. He continues to be a Patriot. He's going to compete for playing time with Bailey Zappi. And it just adds to the overall intrigue as to where this team is heading, and where it's going to be a year from now. Who will the quarterback be? Who will the coach be? Who will anyone be on the roster? It's felt never like this before, where so much is up in the air about the short-term and long-term reality of this franchise.
And it really does reopen the conversation about Lamar Jackson. Could the Patriots ship Mac Jones there and a first-round pick for Lamar Jackson and then deal with the contract that we have had bubbling the conversation frequently because of murmurs that Bill would really like Lamar Jackson? And I think the one interesting thing about Lamar Jackson as it relates to Bill is, one, his team has not been able to defend him. And when Bill sees a player like that, he wants a player like that. And two, I've never heard Bill Belichick ever at a podium mention an opposing player's contract. And he did that last year. He said, wait till we see the contract that he gets in reference to Lamar Jackson. Never have heard that before. So that would be the interesting shoe to drop. And the other interesting shoe to drop, I think, would be Robert Kraft fully believing that the reason Bill's out, quote unquote, on Mac is related to Bill serving Mac a poop sandwich with no bread last year. And the kid finally saying, ew, this stinks.
I believe that all options have to be on the table. And I think back to Robert Kraft last week talking about how important draft picks are. This gets back to Lamar Jackson. What do you give up to get Lamar Jackson apart from the money? The one thing that gets overlooked all the time when we talk about the Deshaun Watson contract in Cleveland, $230 million, fully guaranteed, 5 years. Yeah, and they gave up a lot of crap to get him. 3 first-round picks and more. You give up important draft picks that can become great players at low cost for multiple years that are the nucleus of your team. They're the heart and soul of a generation of talent that works its way up the ladder and becomes your future star players if you draft well. You'd have to give up a lot to get Lamar Jackson. I don't think Mac Jones in a 1 would get Lamar Jackson away from the Ravens at this point. And I'm not sure the Ravens would even trade Lamar Jackson to the Patriots. There's a lot of animosity still lingering between the two franchises. And the Ravens would have to feel they've got no other option before they would even explore it. So I just think everything is up in the air. I think everything is on the table. And I don't know how you guys interpreted what Robert Kraft said last year when he was asked point blank if Bill Belichick can survive another losing season. Anything other than a yes in that context for me is no. And I look at Bill now as on the hot seat. And he's still in charge. He's still in charge, but he's on the hot seat. And what's he going to do to get off the hot seat? And how pissed is he going to be about being put on the hot seat, about Kraft saying what Kraft said? There's just a lot of stuff here. Yeah, for a team that isn't used to having a lot of stuff, there's a lot of stuff going on.
There is a lot of stuff going on. Roberto, our producer, Rob Snyder, is going to join us for Quickfire. One thing I want to mention is we've heard some people today theorize, well, why would the Patriots bring in Bill O'Brien to coach Mac Jones if they just want to move on from Mac Jones? And to me, I say, you guys understand they still needed an offensive coordinator? Aside from that, hiring Bill O'Brien as the offensive coordinator was kind of a Robert Kraft production. Wouldn't be surprised if Bill Belichick thought things were moving in the right direction by the end of last year. Hand to God. All right, Roberto, it's time now for Quickfire, presented by your local New England Honda dealers.
Yeah, so let's just talk about the depth then. How about the pecking order at cornerback, Tom?
I think that's great news. The pecking order to me is Jack Jones, Marcus Jones, Jalen Mills. And right there you have, 3 guys who you can trot out there. Jonathan Jones obviously as well. They're going to intermingle them at the safety position too, perhaps, Jonathan Jones and Jalen Mills. But to me, Phil, they look good, but there's some draft candidates up there at 14.
Oh, no doubt. Up there at 14 and really throughout the draft. I think the Patriots need a corner, Tom, even though they have all those names that you listed. And corner might be the deepest position in the draft, certainly on the defensive side of the ball. But at 14, you have Christian Gonzalez out of Oregon, who probably is the best athlete of the bunch, 6'2", all kinds of speed. I think the guy that they would love the most would be Devin Witherspoon, who absolutely tries to bury people on a consistent basis. We know Bill Belichick really values tackling from his corners. He's not the biggest guy, though, so he might slide. Even though he's perceived to be one of the best corners in this year's class, he's 180 pounds. He might slide to the Patriots at 14. I think they would love to scoop him up there.
Plus, we get to call him Spoon Man. But what about the talent at tight end? Rob Rang over at Fox Sports had this to say: with all due respect to quarterbacks, perhaps no position on the offensive side of the ball this year has NFL scouts more excited than 2023's unique crop at tight end. It is a much stronger class than we've seen in the past several years, offering both high-end talent and excellent depth. Phil, I'll start with you. They have Hunter Henry, they have Mike Gesicki, but should they be thinking about a tight end here?
No question. You have to. You have to plan for the future at this position, especially if you want to utilize it the way that it looks like they want to utilize it. Bill O'Brien, last time he was here, we all remember it, 2011, Aaron Hernandez and Rob Gronkowski, they dominated the middle of the field. I don't know if that combination of Gesicki and Hunter Henry is going to do that moving forward, Tom. Again, really strong. Talk about deep positions on the other side of the ball now on offense. Tight end might be number 1. Darnell Washington from Georgia, a behemoth. Tucker Kraft from South Dakota State. He's a jackrabbit, Tom. He's big. He blocks. That's what the Patriots want.
Well, they want that, but the interesting thing is, too, they're going to need it because both Gesicki and Hunter Henry are up after this year. So you mentioned those two, but Phil, also Dalton Kincaid and Michael Mayer are at the top of the food chain at that position. Would it be insane to go tight end at 14 and check off one of your pass catching needs?
I would say yes. I would. I think it would be a little bit insane, again, because the depth is so great there and because there are quality players later in the draft, whether it's second, third, maybe even fourth round. I think you have to look at premium positions, receiver, corner, some of the most expensive positions in the sport. That's where you should be looking, in my opinion, in the first round.
Good point.
I don't think you're insane, Tom. One last thing to look at, and Tom, you just actually brought this up. There's a lot of guys that are up after this year. Hunter Henry, Trent Brown, Kendrick Bourne. You can see the list here. Who, in your mind, is the most important to be bringing back here?
Right down the bottom, I would say you can go with those 3 names: Kyle Duggar, Mike Onwenu, and Josh Uche. All of those, as Phil just referenced, premium positions in the Patriots scheme. If you want to run the offense in a particular way, you need good guards. You need interior protection for a player like Mac Jones. You need a pass rusher opposite Matt Judon to get the bang for your buck that you're spending on Matt Judon. Am I right there, Phil?
You are. And because it's harder to find some of those positions than others, though, I would prioritize it this way. I would look at those same 3 players, but I would go Uche first, then Duggar, then Onwenu. Uche might cost you the most, but maybe if you can get him done this offseason, Tom, he's had a bunch of injuries through the first several seasons of his career, but he showed high-end potential at the same time. So maybe you try to lock him up now, you get him at a little bit of a discount, and then you reap the rewards down the line.
And that's why I bring it up now. It's important to plan with the draft coming up by bringing in players at positions of need. From the stands, right now, I threw this out there. Which 3 do you make a priority to re-sign after 2023? Here's all the names. Trent Brown's on there too, and you got You got your wide receivers, Kendrick Bourne and Devontae Parker. You guys banged in with a few comments as always. Duggar, Onwenu, Uche said Prack Jones.
Smart guy.
Yeah. Onwenu, Duggar, and Bentley. You have to be able to keep Mac upright, and Onwenu's one of the best guards in the game. Duggar blossoming into an all-pro. I'm going to go Pro Bowl on that. And with the McCourty retirement, it's important to keep him. Bentley, the unsung hero of the defense. We got one more. It's Mark Iarardi.
Nice
Depends
job.
on how guys like Bourne, Gesicki, Henry, and Parker perform with a legit OC this year directing the offense. That would be interesting to me. If Gesicki and Henry can play, those guys I'd put up at the top of the list. Also, Kendrick Bourne. If he's going to turn into Deebo Samuel, he better do it soon. It's time for my slant. Watch out! Ladies and gentlemen, we are 3 weeks from the NFL draft. The Patriots are sitting on their highest pick since 2008 when they got Gerard Mayo with the 10th overall pick. They are primed to get a great player, and they could use one of those since their best players are currently, well, just pretty good. So when I look at this group and I see all the quarterbacks who are going to come off the board in the top 10, and I see some of the edge players who are going to come off the board in the top 10, the Patriots sitting at 14 are going to have driven down to them tackles, corners, and wideouts, all of whom can really put some vim and vigor into their offense, Phil. So don't trade down, stay put, take a player that everybody says, wow, I wish we had that guy.
I'm going to replace a word that you used, though. You said there's going to be a great player there for the Patriots at 14 overall. Because of that situation, the quarterbacks are pumping all this talent down to the middle of the first round. What I would replace that word with, I would replace great with very good. Because this year, I think, unfortunately for the Patriots, Tom, it's just not the deepest draft in terms of high-end talent. If they do any kind of movement at all, I would say trade back, pick up a little extra scratch in later rounds, and get a similarly talented player at 25 that you would at 14.
All right, this Florio thing today really jacked everything up. But should we throw in the poll here, or should we save it to next week, Robbie? We'll throw the poll in. What the hell? If the Patriots take a receiver at 14, your personal preference would be JSN, overwhelming. Zay Flowers, you can't go wrong with either one. Quentin Johnson, Phil talked to him on the Next Pats podcast last week. So look for that and look for our continued draft coverage throughout the rest of the season. Bye, Phil.